The Russian army has broken through the Ukrainian defensive line south of Sudzha in the Kursk region. Defense forces of Ukraine are trying to stabilize the situation. But Russian armed forces are advancing in the Kursk direction, having broken through the Ukraine's defenses between the settlements of Guevo and Kurilovka south of Sudzha. Russian paratroopers are moving toward the state border, intending to block the supply route of the Ukrainian armed forces. At the same time, the Russian armed forces are occupying territory on the approaches to Basovka. There are about 12 kilometers left before the encirclement of the enemy group and the connection of Russian units. The neck of the cauldron is gradually narrowing. Russian units managed to drive a wedge 4 to 5 kilometers deep and reach an alternative supply route for the Ukrainians in Sudzha, which they used due to the impossibility of delivering manpower and weapons along the main road. The logistics of the Ukrainian armed forces in this area are becoming increasingly difficult to access. The grim situation for Ukrainian troops near Sudzha is also reflected in Ukrainian publics. The logistics of the Ukrainian armed forces in Kursk region are practically completely broken and are constantly controlled by the Russians, Kiev analysts note. Ukraine also complains that the Russian armed forces have cleared the territory of the village of Sverdlikovo and are putting pressure on the Sumy region in the Basovka area, expanding the gray zone. According to a source from one of the units operating in this area of the Kursk region, the defense forces are currently trying to stabilize the situation. We are now trying to stabilize the situation so that the enemy cannot completely close off the communication routes. The Russians probably went for a breakthrough near Sudzha to get another route to advance to the key road of the Ukrainian group in the Kursk region, Sumy-Sudzha. Since the beginning of January 2025, they have been trying to take control of this road. At the end of February, the Russians made their first attempt to approach this road from the north, through the village of Novinkoy.
In the Pokrovsk direction, Russian troops are already facing serious problems. At the same time, even on its own territory in the Kursk region, Russia is conducting a counter-offensive campaign extremely slowly. It has been going on for almost 7 months. This was stated in an interview with Glavred by military political observer of the Information Resistance Group, Alexander Kovalenko, answering the question of how long Russia will be able to fight if it is not given a break. According to him, in the area of responsibility of the Dnieper group of troops, which covers the left bank Kherson region and the Zaporizhia region up to the Orekov direction and Hulyai, there is currently practically no activity by Russian forces. Kovalenko noted that enemy troops are still attempting to operate on the Kherson Islands and in the Zaporizhia region, but compared to the Pokrovsk direction, the Kurakovsky salient, or the Liman-Kupiansk axis, their activity is significantly lower. Despite the fact that Dnieper is one of the largest groups of troops, it remains the least proactive. In the first half of 2025, Russia will be so exhausted that it will lose the ability to hold the defense. It will be able to conduct offensive actions by inertia and exclusively with human resources. That is, now everything is being transformed into an exclusively infantry component, and this was expected. In such a situation, discontent in the army is growing. The Russians are now completely switching to an infantry format, and this does not produce results, Kovalenko points out. The analyst noted that if earlier Russia could seize 600 to 700 square kilometers of territory per week at the peak of its capabilities, now this figure has dropped to 100 to 200 square kilometers. At the same time, personnel losses per square kilometer have increased 2 to 3 times. This leads to significant exhaustion of Russia, both militarily and economically. Recall that, as media previously reported, Ukrainian troops are conducting counterattacks in the east and have made progress in the Toretsk direction in the Donetsk region. Despite the superiority of Russian forces several months ago, Ukrainian defenders are actively counter-attacking in Toretsk and its environs, advancing into the city that the Russian Federation previously declared occupied. Forbes reports. According to geolocation footage published on February the 28th, the Ukrainian Defense Forces were able to gain a foothold in the area of Tolbukin Street and near the central mine in the central part of Toretsk, the Institute for the Study of War notes. Nearly 3 years into the full-scale war, more than 50,000 Russian military personnel have deserted their units and are AWOL. The highest number of cases has been recorded in the southern military district of the Russian Armed Forces, reports the Institute for the Study of War, ISW. Ukrainian hackers gained access to an internal presentation from the Russian Ministry of Defense, which lists the number of criminal cases initiated by the Russian authorities against military personnel who are AWOL as of December the 15th, 2024. The Ukrainian OSINT community noted that the data presented in the presentation includes cases where Russian commanders classified soldiers missing in action during assaults as AWOL. The Ukrainian open-source intelligence organization Frontelligence Insight used the data from the presentation and calculated the scale of this phenomenon. Yes, the total number of documented desertion cases from February 2022 to mid-December 2024 is 50,554. Of these, in the Southern Military District, 22,577. In the Central Military District, 13,769. In the Moscow Military District, 7,178. In the Leningrad Military District, 3,052. In the Eastern Military District, 3,378. The document also notes that 58.8% of desertion cases occurred among military personnel of the 51st Combined Arms Army and the 3rd CAA. It is mentioned that most desertions occurred between 2023 and 2024, while relatively fewer took place in 2022. The Russian army continues to suffer colossal losses in the full-scale war with Ukraine. Over 95,000 people fighting for Russia's military have now died as the war in Ukraine enters the 4th year, according to data analysed by the BBC. The figure doesn't include those who were killed serving in the militia of the self-proclaimed Donbas republics, which we estimate to be between 21,000 and 23,500 fighters. BBC Russian independent media group Mediazona and volunteers have been counting deaths since February 2022. The list includes names of the deceased that were verified using information from official reports, newspapers, social media, and new memorials and graves. The real death toll is believed to be much higher. The Russian registry lists over 3,000 bodies of soldiers who went missing and could not be identified. In recent months, the Russians have transferred twice as many bodies of the deceased as they did during the entire period of the full-scale war. French President Emmanuel Macron states that by 2030, Russia plans to mobilize 3 million soldiers and replenish its army with thousands of tanks.